Are you the type of person who works hard, is a people pleaser, and tries to do everything right, and yet you still somehow get overlooked? The truth is, maybe the issue isn't specifically you, maybe you just haven't been performative enough. This is a topic I've been wanting to make a video about for a while now, and it was mainly inspired by a woman that I used to work with who, for the sake of anonymity, I'll just call her Carly. For a bit of context, I was working as an event coordinator at the time, which means that I was networking constantly at many of the fundraisers or meetings that were in my area. And Carly's role was adjacent to mine. She was kind of like a marketing person for the organization that we both worked for. And that meant that she would go around and meet with government officials or community stakeholders, local businesses, churches, or whatever else, and attempt to get things like resources or donations. As I continued to work for that company, I began to notice a kind of funny pattern where no matter where I went, immediately after I introduced myself and the organization's name, I would always seem to get the exact same response. "You work with Carly, don't you?" No matter how obscure the venue or what position that person seemed to hold, in every event that I went to, there always seemed to be at least one person who knew Carly as if they were good friends going back years. And every time that I would have the fortune of randomly running into her at one of the events that we attended, I would always appreciate having her by my side as we would work through a room together or network side by side. But the thing is, there was one very big difference between Carly and I. Her role often had her working outside of the office, sometimes outside of regular work hours, whereas my role had me often sitting within the office planning out logistics or doing research for future events that I was coordinating. I would show up to office meetings and present the tangible accomplishments that I had been achieving with very clear-cut and obvious goals, which were, of course, the events themselves. And so people could see that I would show up to the office on time, and then I would leave throughout the day for maybe some kind of networking event that I had planned, and then I would return to continue on with my work. So from an outside perspective, it looked like I was working my ass off. But Carly, on the other hand, was too busy with the many external outside meetings that she had throughout the day, or maybe she was just taking a very well-deserved day off after a full weekend of working nonstop. Carly usually wasn't present in many meetings because her role was often independent and didn't really involve the other departments in the same capacity that my role did. And in the meetings that she did attend, it was difficult for her to fully articulate the amount of work that she had been doing to our coworkers. The names of the people that she had allied our organization with were often meaningless to our coworkers, and the donation numbers that she had accumulated may have seemed small to someone who wasn't fully aware of the difficulty of her position. Carly didn't have the same benefit that I did in having our coworkers come out to my events and put names to faces for people that I had been networking with, or they could see the fruits of my labor in the event itself. In short, our coworkers could see everything that I was doing, and they could barely see anything that Carly was doing, despite Carly putting in, at least from my perspective, way more work than I was doing and with way more skill. And the difference was night and day. Carly was treated like trash. She was the butt of jokes, nobody wanted to associate with her, and every time that she did come into the office, people would roll their eyes as if to say, "Oh, look who decided to show up today." Everybody seemed to think that Carly was getting paid to do basically nothing, and the upper level management who knew of the benefit that Carly was to the organization did not really attempt to clear up this misconception. This is a real story, and variations of it happen every day, and maybe it's happened to you. Carly's situation is a bit of a cautionary tale, and it was especially instructive to me because it really put into perspective why I had dealt with some of the situations that I had in previous professional settings or academic settings, where I just felt kind of invisible or disrespected. There is actually a lot of research to back this up, and this has a lot to do with the availability bias, which was thoroughly researched as far back as 1973 in the classic paper by Daniel Kahneman and colleagues. In it, they found that people are significantly more likely to judge the importance of something based on how easily instances of it came to mind, and not by actual unseen data. To apply this to Carly's case specifically, we see that no instances of her work came to the minds of our coworkers And so they didn't really value her contributions as very important to the company. Carly's situation extends to further than just professional settings. This is generally how life tends to work. The takeaway, at least from what I've found in my experiences, is that fake performativeness is often rewarded more than genuine silent authenticity in pretty much every aspect of life, whether that's in academic settings, professional workplaces, or romantic relationships. Admittedly, I used to be like Carly, and I would imagine that many of you who clicked on this video are probably the same way. Media, like the cartoons that we watched as kids, or lessons that we learned in Sunday school or kindergarten, taught many of us that a truly virtuous person is one that suffers in silence or does quiet acts of kindness for other people, and we were taught to replicate that behavior. But media does not depict reality, and as I get older, I realize that many of the lessons that I was taught as a child were meant more to sound good rather than actually prepare me for success in the real adult world. The reality is that there is no random colleague or manager or potential love interest who is watching you closely enough to notice all of the work that you're putting in that when nobody else is watching. And even if somebody did by chance notice what you were doing, they probably don't really care. I mean, after all, everybody has their own stuff going on that they have to deal with in their own life. On a fundamental level, I think most people desperately want to believe in the just world fallacy. They want to believe that everybody gets what they deserve in the end, that good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. But from what I could see in Carly's life, her career was mostly stagnant and her personal life was largely chaotic. She never seemed to be rewarded by some unseen force or karmic system, at least not while I knew her. There are so many people that I've encountered in my life who never seem to do a single good thing without broadcasting it to everyone around them afterwards. The truth is, they actually understood reality. They didn't need a Carly in their life to teach them such an obvious lesson in their mid-20s. They seemed to know innately that they needed to be as performative as possible in everyday life because that's what gets rewarded in society. And maybe you could call them narcissists or sociopaths, but the harsh truth is that they are the ones who often succeed. It's deeply depressing, but often you have to be performative if you want to get respect. And I think that's one of the main reasons why those people you may see as fake or pretentious can oftentimes get ahead of you or get the things that you feel you deserve. This is a bitter pill to swallow, but it's more than just an opinion. There is a lot of provable evidence to back this up. In a 2021 paper by Ohana and colleagues, researchers analyzed discourse around the topic of impression management, and they came to several conclusions based on previous studies. They found that people who use impression management tactics like self-promotion, ingratiation, or whatever other methods that influence how others perceive you are actually provably more likely to receive job offers and higher evaluations in the workplace. However, it is important to note that this is kind of a double-edged sword, and in a paper by Wang and colleagues back in 2020, it was found that those who frequently used impression management tactics were actually less likely to feel a sense of satisfaction with their lives. Ironically, the people who engage in impression management often trade their happiness in exchange for career success or the admiration of their colleagues. The reason given in the paper was because of the increased feelings of loneliness and a lack of control that comes with impression management tactics. And from my own personal conclusion, I would imagine it's probably very taxing to put on a kind of fake persona at all times. You may think that my advice to be performative when doing good deeds is morally wrong, and maybe it is, but I think that it's important to look at it from a different perspective and maybe a more utilitarian perspective, because even though it is performative, at the end of the day, it's still good deeds. And the success that you reap from being performative and fake could give you more of an accumulation of resources or a bigger platform to do more acts of good down the line. Maybe it's best to think of it as adapting to the real world and focus more on the end goal of doing good rather than how you actually go about doing it. I think the key is to find a balance where you don't go overly pretentious and obnoxious with your performativeness, but that you make it come about naturally, that you allow people to see the good works that you're doing seemingly by chance. But even if you fail at this and you make it way too obvious and you become a well-known, pretentious, and fake guy, I think that is still a better outcome than being the guy that nobody notices or respects despite putting in a significant amount of energy and effort. This video is not to encourage you to become the worst version of yourself. It's more so just to help you become aware of the competition for success, because there are many people who don't share your same innate desire to do good in this world. You are competing in a fierce competition against performative sociopaths who do not share your same values. And it's important to know the game and know how to outperform them if you're going to do the most amount of good that you can in this world. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you'd click the like button. It'll really help me out in these beginning stages. I'll also be covering a variety of topics in the future, so if you liked what I had to say in this video, maybe consider sticking around and subscribing. I do read the comments, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say below, so maybe we could have a discussion.